good to see you guys again. Thanks for coming. I'm excited about this. Is kind of a fun topic. It's got a few quirks to it. And it relates very much to health again and aging. This is a fourth installment and we'll talk about mitochondria. They're usually described as the power plant of the body, the cell. And they do a few other things as well that I'm not going to get into. But the main thing they do is produce energy. And I just want to bring up a quote. It's the same slide from last time. The two causes of degeneration, and there's a quote from a book by a neurologist, Dr. Perlmutter. He says, "The same forces that age your body are aging your brain, only they hit your brain earlier and harder. These culprits are at the core of virtually all brain degeneration, from mild memory issues to Alzheimer's. And the two reasons are the proliferation of destructive chemicals called free radicals, which we talked about last time, and then two, the decline in the ability of the brain to make energy." And that's what we'll talk about today, because these two things put together creates a low-grade inflammation, which is the true mechanism for virtually all degenerative disease. When we talk about the brain and the nervous system, we talk about telomeres. The way that they get damaged is because of free radicals and because we don't have enough energy to deal with it. So we will talk about energy today. And just a few terms. People talk about metabolism, and that's a common term. We'll introduce also anabolism, which simply means to build up, catabolism, which means to break down, and metabolism is just transform. It's basically taking food and turning it into energy and body parts. That's metabolism. And just a little side note here, because we're talking a lot about stress and brain. Anabolism, building up, can only happen from the parasympathetic. That portion of rebuilding, repairing, building stuff really only works all the way when we're in the parasympathetic or relaxed mode. And catabolism, breakdown, that's when we're stressed. When we are stressed, the body doesn't care about anything else than to survive that moment. So it's not going to worry about healing anything. It's not going to worry about fighting infections. It's not going to worry about digesting food. It just wants to get away from that grizzly bear. So in those moments, you're in a catabolic state. You'll break down, you'll sacrifice anything. It's kind of like a steamship where they're trying to get a little more speed out of the engine and they're running out of fuel, so they start breaking pieces off the boat and feeding it to the flames. It doesn't make sense in the long run, but it makes sense in an emergency. So that's kind of what the body is doing also. And when we talk about the food that we eat, they talk about we need so many calories and we need fresh air to breathe and we need oxygen and all that. We don't really need those things per se. We don't need oxygen. We just need oxygen because it can produce energy for us. We don't need calories. We just need the end result of the calories and the oxygen. So we don't use those things directly, we use the end result of them. And that end result, and I just bring that point up because the end result is what we're going to talk about today. When we talk about energy, in the body there's only one kind of energy. It's called ATP. And we'll write that out for you. It's in the note. ATP, it's too long to write the whole thing. It stands for adenosine triphosphate. And this is in constant exchange with ADP, which is adenosine diphosphate. So as you can see on slide number 4, there is in triphosphate, that third phosphate, it's like it's jammed onto the molecule with a high energy bond. And that high energy bond is where we get all of our energy. It's the only energy that the body can use outright. It fuels all of the reactions and mechanisms and your movement and your digestions and moving things. It does everything. And the energy that we get is when that high energy bond is released and ATP turns into ADP. When that third phosphate is shut off, is lopped off, we release energy. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but that's all the energy that we ever get is from that reaction. And that's the same for all of biology. It's that is the mechanism for getting stuff done.
What is this? Is it a molecule?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So ATP is a molecule, exactly. And it doesn't look like the squares, but my PowerPoint skills are limited. That's when it comes to drawing molecules. And then the body recycles this all the time. So we'll get to that. So what is this energy used for? There's three categories: membrane transport, motility or muscle contraction, and biosynthesis. None of these happen by themselves. So signaling is what the brain does. And it's basically a signal happens when ions rush across a membrane, and then we need ATP to pump them back upstream so that they can do it again. And we keep pumping, keep pumping. That alone accounts for 20% of all the energy that you use. 20% of all the calories and all the oxygen that you ever take in goes to that alone. Just pumping those ions back across the membrane to make signaling possible. And then we need it for absorption, for digestion. And digestion is involved with all three of these, because digestion uses membrane transport to bring foodstuffs across the membrane in the gut. It uses muscle contraction to move the stuff along, and for digestion, the peristalsis. And digestion uses biosynthesis to put the stuff back together into forms that are usable for the body. And digestion uses as much as 35% of all of your energy. So far we've used 55% of your energy, and you haven't done anything yet. That's kind of funny. We think that I'm so tired, I used up all my energy. Well, the energy that we use for moving around isn't even half of the energy needed in the body to just keep things behind the scenes going. Muscle contraction, that's any kind of movement, big or small. So that's the big voluntary movements, it's exercise, but it's also, again, digestion and things like vasoconstriction, which means regulating blood flow and blood pressure. Biosynthesis, your immune system has, whenever you get an infection, your immune system has to manufacture white blood cells and immune cells of the specific kind that you need to fight off that infection. So when you're sick, you usually get extremely tired, and it's because now all that energy goes into making those immune cells. And that's a very, very expensive process. You're making a whole lot of them. DNA, RNA, proteins, growth, repair, healings, all of those molecules that you use for processes in the body and for the tissue itself, they have to be manufactured. That doesn't happen by itself either. And then, of course, you have to make molecules like neurotransmitters and hormones and digestive enzymes. And digestive enzymes are also very expensive. That's a very, very energy-intense process. And that's also why we get tired after a big meal. So how much ATP do we need? These things are really, really small. They're molecules. So you use 25 million units of ATP per cell per second. That's a pretty enormous number. Every cell, every second. So that makes about 2.2 trillion units of ATP per cell every day. And then you have about 100 trillion cells. So that makes about 10 to the 28th molecules worth. But another interesting fact is that at any given moment, you only have about 3 to 4 seconds worth of ATP. So if you do an all-out sprint, then you're going to run out of ATP in about 3 to 4 seconds. And whatever you rely on after that is lactic acid plus ATP that your body makes from that point on. So this supply of ATP is that short-lived that whatever you're using this minute, you didn't have last minute. And every 24 hours, this ATP, ADP is recycled anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 times, probably more if you exercise. So when you add all this up, you recycle some 10 to the 28th, to the power 28th molecules of ATP, and if you were to, it's not like that it leaves or comes into the body, but the total weight of that is about 400 pounds, 200 kilos worth of ATP every day. And who does all this? This is where it gets kind of funny. It's the mitochondrion. Mitochondrion is singular, mitochondria is plural. And every cell in your body has anywhere from just a few to several thousand mitochondria per cell. So the tissues that need more energy, they're going to obviously have more mitochondria. And those are primarily the brain, the heart, and the liver. Because the heart keeps pumping blood all day long, it never rests. Your brain is always, always, always processing. And your liver is always trying to clean out and process all the foods that you eat. And here's where it gets interesting. I think this is really funny. It's one of these quirks of nature. See if you think it's equally funny. I'm easily amused, I guess. That mitochondria, they're in our cells, but they're not really part of our biology. They have for a long, long time, they have become part of our biology, but they have their own DNA. So when you get your DNA from your mom and your dad, that does not include DNA from mitochondria. You get 23 chromosomes from your mom and 23 from your dad, and that makes 46 total, or 23 pairs. But mitochondria is not in there. So the mitochondria is a little inclusion in the mother's egg. Because every cell of your body has them, but they don't participate in the conception part of combining DNA. So therefore you get all of your mitochondria from your mother. And the interesting part is, because of this, you can use this to trace lineage. Because there's only, every time that the cell combines from the mother and father, you have a new, completely unique human that never existed before. But with mitochondria, that doesn't happen. There is no renewal of that DNA. It's the exact same, except for occasional mutations, and that's only happened a few times in the history of mankind. So there's only a handful. It's like we all belong to a mitochondrial clan or category. And if you trace this back, we can actually trace every single human back to one person, which they call mitochondrial Eve, who lived in Africa somewhere around 190,000 to 200,000 years ago, and she is the ancestor of all humans on Earth today.
That's fascinating.
Thank you. So we don't all have the same father, And she was not the only female living at the time, but she was the only female that have offspring living today. And the only mitochondrial variations since then have been from mutations. So that's how they can trace people back and sort of see where people come from and belong. So this mitochondria, it has its own circular DNA. We have kind of form DNAs, 23 of them. The mitochondrial DNA is a circular single chromosome. And somewhere along, probably hundreds of millions of years ago, there was a bacterium that migrated into a cell and somehow helped that cell make energy so that the two liked each other and stuck together from that point on. And that's where mitochondria live. And they make 95% of our energy. So life as we know it could not exist if that inclusion hadn't happened. So this becomes interesting also from a health standpoint and aging standpoint, because it turns out this mitochondrial DNA is not quite as sophisticated as our nuclear DNA. So humans live a really long time because we have efficient repair mechanisms for our DNA. When something goes wrong, we can repair it. And because of that, there's relatively few flaws along the way, and we age slowly because of that. But in a manner of speaking, our DNA, our mitochondria age faster than we do. So it's a function of our aging, and it's a function of accelerated aging. Because it is much more susceptible to damage. First of all, it only has rudimentary capability of repair compared to our nuclear DNA. But then the other factor is, if you remember, we said that last time, every time that you make energy with oxygen, you also make a free radical. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
It is an inevitable byproduct of energy production. So inside the mitochondria is where all the energy is made. So the concentration of free radicals in and around the mitochondria is way, way, way higher than anywhere else. So not only are they poor at repairing, but they're exposed to a much, much higher level of free radicals than other tissues. So because of this, the mutation rate for mitochondrial DNA is about 15 times higher than nuclear DNA. And then on top of that, it repairs worse. So when these mitochondria get old and don't function as well, it's kind of like a rusty engine. The ATP output goes down, the energy production goes down, but the free radical output goes up. So it's less efficient, so we get less out of it, we get less energy and more smoke, if you will. And ROS is reactive oxygen species, that's the other word for free radical. And these two factors are associated with accelerated aging and cancer. So we want to take care of our mitochondria and provide them resources so that they can sustain their energy production better. We have talked about some of these before, but I'll review them. CoQ10 is an enzyme. It's used within the membrane folds of the mitochondria to make energy. It's just part of that chain that creates it. There are two forms of CoQ10. One is called ubiquinone, which is inactive. One is called ubiquinol, which is the activated. So after age 35, we lose two things. We lose the ability to make CoQ10. It starts actually declining from age 20. But after age 35, we also lose the ability to convert the inactive to the active. So when we supplement it, we really want to make sure we get the active form because that can be absorbed and utilized as much as 8 to 10 times better than the other form. Another one we haven't talked about, but I think you guys are all using it, is acetyl L-carnitine. This is something that occurs naturally in the membranes of mitochondria, and it helps transport fatty acids across the membrane for burning. So we have two primary energy sources. It's carbohydrates and fats, but they have to get across the membranes in order to be available. And as the mitochondria gets damaged and older, then we can help them by providing this acetyl L-carnitine so that they can get the fuel into the cell better, into the mitochondria. And the acetyl group that they add to the supplement, it helps the molecule cross the blood-brain barrier. And this is really important because a lot of the mitochondria we're trying to help are in the brain. So we want to get this substance across quickly and intact. So because of this, acetylcholine may have unique neuroprotective, neuromodulatory, and neurotrophic properties, meaning neurotrophic is the ability to grow new nerve cells, new brain cells. And acetylcarnitine may also help with memory function, mitochondrial structure and function, inhibit age-related oxidative damage, and restore some key enzymes as well. So it is, most people who study aging put it very close to the top of the list, and so do we. So the cartoon, our bodies replace millions of skin cells every day, so how come the new ones don't look any younger than the old ones? And you guys are getting so knowledgeable that it's just barely a joke anymore. You're gonna start explaining that pretty soon. So in summary, the mitochondria are bacteria-like inclusions inside cells that don't really belong to us. They've been there for a long time, but they're not part of our DNA. They make about 95% energy. And their DNA is less protected and much more sensitive than our nuclear DNA. Whenever we make energy, we create free radicals, and therefore these mitochondria, as they get damaged, they produce less energy and more free radicals. The engine starts smoking. This decline is associated with diseases, accelerated aging, and cancer. So what can we do? We want to protect ourselves and our mitochondria by, number one, reducing stress. That's what the sum total of all these talks that we're doing is about. Eat better, move better, feel better. And then we can take some supplements as follows. One, we want to add back what's running low. That's the CoQ10 or the ubiquinol. We want to improve membrane transport, and that's acetyl L-carnitine. And we want to help defend those mitochondria against the free radical, against oxidative damage. And the two top things to take in addition to all other antioxidants is N-acetylcysteine, NAC, which is a glutathione precursor, and undenatured whey to also help boost glutathione production. So that's the reason, except for being good food, that's the reason you're taking those, the whey protein, is for glutathione. And of course glutathione helps protect every cell in the body, but along the way they protect the mitochondria as well. So that is all we have. Thank you very much for coming. And now you know all about mitochondria.
Thanks. Fascinating.
Isn't it though?